Hi, today we're on the People Progressing podcast, and I'm just over the moon excited with having Kai Correa on here. He's the bench coach for the San Francisco Giants, and he's had a great rise in the coaching ranks, and we'll go over that and get into that. But Kai, I'm just so excited to have you on here and help people understand where they can come, where they are at now, and how they can rise to that level that you've risen to, and some of the things that make you tick. Can you just tell us a little bit about where you grew up and some of the things that happened as you were growing up?
Yeah, of course. And well, first and foremost, thanks for having me. And one of the primary reasons why you and I have a relationship and why I wanted to be on this is directly related to how I grew up. And so, as you know, I'm the grandson, son, and nephew of high school coaches. And so, high school coaches have always had great reverence to me in terms of what they give and hours. And it's not for the pay. It's not for good fortune. It's truly to be extensions of the classroom and teach and develop culture. And so wherever I've lived in the US, I've formed relationships with the longtime local high school coaches. Those are the people I gravitated towards, and that's how you and I met. And it was the same for me growing up. Is that was my education in baseball. I grew up in Hilo, Hawaii, a little city, 50,000 people on the east side of the Big Island, relatively rural place. And the Big Island is so large that all the other islands can fit on top of it in terms of land mass. So it's much more country than it is urban. And my grandfather was the longtime high school baseball coach there, from after World War II through his passing, a handful of years ago. And so he did that for a long time. And my father and uncle took his place as the local head coaches. And so I kind of grew up with that in my blood. And I was thinking about this the other day. I had a young kid to ask me about, like my baseline baseball background. And one thing I realized in talking to this kid, he's a 16-year-old athlete, is that one thing I was fortunate to is I was privy to coach talk. Players only hear a certain percentage of why and what things are being done. And after they leave, the coaches sit around in the bucket and they really unpack it. And I didn't realize the value of that until I've gotten older, that I sat there every day after school from 5 to 8 to 12 to 13 years old. And I heard how plays and players were broken down and how the pieces on the board were being moved and why potentially this guy was going to go from left field to right field, or why we were changing starting pitchers the next day. And so I think that exposure to the baseball end of it was huge for me. As a kid, you start thinking the game in the way those conversations unfolded. And then the other thing is the social wealth and culture component to that. I learned to appreciate the role of the coach when I saw how revered my grandfather was in the community, when I saw how, firemen or guys at the grocery store or those folks interacted with my dad, my grandfather, took them back to being kids again. And they had that gratuity. It showed me the value of the coach in a community. And so I think both of those things combined, being the son and the grandson and nephew of a coach, really led me to want to be in the profession, and then gave me an advantage as I began.
Yeah, I say the same thing. My dad was a high school coach too, and I grew up on the field. I mean, that's where I was all the time. My mom would take me down after school, and I'd be down there with dad. And I think what it really helped me, and I think what's kind of what you're going to here, is in terms of leadership, it really helped me develop emotional intelligence, because I was really aware of how all the players reacted to my dad once he made certain decisions, like playing time and all those kind of things. Like, I would always get so nervous, like if guy wasn't going to be in the lineup, and I knew dad was going to hang the lineup, and a guy wasn't going to be in the lineup, I was always nervous about how he was going to react towards my dad. So it always kind of made me really aware socially of other people and being able to read other people. Would you say that you kind of got that too?
Wow, I think that's incredibly well put. And I hadn't thought about it like that, but I think being very in tune on how the coach's decisions affect like the ecosystem of team and the individual people is something when you're a coach's son. Because the other thing is people say things to you,
Yeah.
right? They don't hold
Yeah.
back punches to the kid, right? They'll say
Hmm.
something under their breath when they walk by, or you hear it from a classmate, in school when your dad's not around. And so you're acutely aware of the impact playing time and cuts. I used to dread cut time of year
Oh,
as a kid because, I'm going to see those folks at, you
oh
know,
yeah.
out in the community, and
Yeah.
what are they going to say? And then you also grew to appreciate how well thought out those decisions were.
Hmm.
They're never, you know, on a whim. The coach
Right.
is very aware of the impact he has on kids' lives, and he's very thoughtful when he crafts the lineup and when he makes his team and he says who's going to the JV and who's going to the varsity. And so I think that's a great point. I hadn't thought about it like that, but I think that definitely had an impact on me as well.
Well, and it really came to fruition for me when I was coaching my own son and I had to make cuts and then knowing that he had to go to school and go through all that stuff and so forth. And it really, I think when you look at it in the business world, it's the same way. If people have emotional intelligence and realize that every decision that they make affects somebody positively and somebody negatively. And the way you avoid problems is you handle the person that it affected negatively first.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I always did when we had to make cuts. I wanted people to understand how hard it was on us because as coaches, as people of leadership, we get into it for people. We get into to help people grow and become better than what they thought they could be. Right. So when we have to cut somebody, that's going against everything that we're getting into this profession for as a leader, not just in sports, but in business as well, I think. And so it really kind of helped us, establish an emotional intelligence that kind of carries on today. Wouldn't you say that is kind of still helping you in your coaching today?
100%, right? And when you think about it, it's the same at every level. It's in recruiting in college and
Hmm.
roster decisions in the fall, at the level I'm at now, it's about calling guys up and sending guys down.
Yeah.
Right? It can be so transactional,
And
and
it
so I
doesn't, yeah. And it doesn't matter what level it's at,
yeah.
even in the major leagues. I think that's really, really telling. What is one thing that you can think of just off the top of your head, not to put you on the spot, but going back to your grandpa who fought in World War II, what's one thing that you got from him that you still carry today and still take into your coaching?
Hmm, gosh, you know, and the issue why that's tough is there's so many things that start
Yeah.
popping into.
Hmm.
I think there's kind of like that blue collar workman like attention to detail. You go in, the coach goes in, you clock. Some days are hard, some days are easy, but you show up for your players every single day. I think that's what good coaches do. You're not, they don't know what's going on at home or, what's your other job. I think that's one thing. And I think, another thing is the love of the underdog, kind of not the optimism, the unconditional optimism that you approach every player with when they walk into the yard. You're realistic about ability, but you're very hopeful on the ceiling
And
for each player.
yeah, and so that I think when I watch you coach, when I watch Kai coach, I see a guy who not only wants the guy to be good, he wants them to be great, but he wants them more importantly to be better than what they thought they even could be.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that comes from I think that comes from Grandpa. He coached at a pretty tough high school, and he would do funny things where a kid couldn't catch fly balls, so he got him out there in a catcher's mask.
Yeah,
And you'd get in trouble doing that today. But I think that the overarching theme was that he wasn't gonna cut the kid loose. He was gonna try to make a left fielder out of this guy that probably shouldn't be on the team at all.
right.
And I think the spirit of that is what coaching's all about. Is that we want to be throw the life preserver. We want to show somebody that they can achieve the potential that they don't even realize.
And that's with every leader, whether it's in sports or business, as a father. I mean, you're
Mhm.
going to do the same thing with your little girl as she starts to grow up. You're going to be doing the same thing to her because you want her to be as bad or good or better than what she even thought she could be.
Yeah.
Now let's go to your dad. So what's something that you took from your dad that you still use today, not just in coaching but in life as well?
Yeah, I think m- my dad, it's kind of like an overflow from Grandpa. He is like the underdog optimist to the extreme. That was I've never seen someone roll with the punches so well. When we talked about the social intelligence of recognizing the negative body language or negative
Mhm.
comments that come with a coach's decision. As a kid, it affects you in a way that you want to react to it. You want to
Yeah.
say something to that guy. You're afraid of it happening as the coach's kid because you see it front and center. And I think my dad was incredibly elite at wearing it, not being reactive, understanding that that was part of the job, and you take the good with the bad, and you wear those late night phone calls, and you don't care about what's being said in the stands. You know that you stand by your decision and it was the right one. And I think that's something I always found really admirable. And I haven't mastered it yet myself, but I'd hope I'd be as good as he is at that. I mean, that's what I thought. The one thing is that managing criticism, it, I didn't see anyone do it as well as he did.
That's really cool. And again, the things that you have taken, because what I see in Kai is a lifelong learner. How important is that as a learner, or as a leader? I'm sorry, as a leader, to be a lifelong learner.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a linchpin for me. If I was listing like certain criteria that have led to like good fortune in my life, that would be in the top 5 immediately. And I think what people forget when you ascend, right? When you get promoted in your workplace, right? Or you get a better job or you go to a better college, you're now at a new level where it's not, you've never made it. You're now surrounded by many more learning opportunities, right? And so if you have the lifelong learner mentality, when you go from coaching high school and club to Division 3, now I've got 4 resources on staff that coach small college baseball for a long time, and I can suck in everything I can from them, plus the experiences that happen in the field. Then you go to Division 1. No, it's not that you made it. All right, I'm going to take what I did there and I'm going to replicate it. No, now I got a new group of guys to learn from and absorb, right? And take everything that I can from them and listen and learn. And then I go to the minor leagues. Did I make it? No, like for me now, this is a great shot. Now I'm in these rooms where these baseball men who've been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years are discussing plays and strategies and situations. What am I going to do? I'm going to shut up and I'm going to absorb again. And so I would say that thought process, both taking the things that happen around you that are organic as learning experiences, and then conjure up your own independent study time,
Mhm.
are 2 linchpins to me for being a lifelong learner, right? I think a lot of people think it's just I'm going to go read books, I'm going to do research, right? And then they don't learn from the folks around them with experience. I think the ultimate combination is growing from those organic moments and situations and conversations that happen throughout the course of work, and then also doing your own independent research. And so that's the balance I try to achieve. And I think, like you said, I think that's one of the most important things for me as a leader.
So how important would you say as a leader, as in your lifetime, in in growing as a leader as you have, how important is listening?
I mean, integral, that's the key part to that organic component I was talking about, right? And if you're the one doing the speaking, right, it's really tough to speak and listen at the same time, right? And I love speaking as much as the next guy, but in those moments when you're really hearing what people are saying, and uninterrupted, it's priceless because you can't replicate experience, right? How the years that you've coached, my grandfather coached, my father's coach, I can't expedite that. I can't be a really, really good coach and a really good researcher and read all the books and have all the strategy and have 10, 20, 30 years of hard decisions come out of those pages. That's not a thing. But what I could do is listen to why you made those decisions, listen to how you made those decisions, listen to your process, listen to how you plan. And maybe that will help me have a little more context and close the gap. And so I think that's what we all seek, right? We all seek the maximum amount of context. Good decisions come from a great deal of context. And context is built by listening to people who've made more of them. So I think that's a really important piece.
Yeah. So real quick, take us through your journey, Kai. Your journey as a player in Hawaii,
Mhm.
all the way to where you're at now. Quickly, I know that's kind of a long journey, but
Yeah.
it's an amazing journey to me. It's something I look up to so amazingly well. I just think it's a crazy story, and I just love it because it's a journey full of listening. I call it list and learn, right? every part of that journey that you've gone to, you've listed and learned from each one of them. And just tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I grew up in Gila, like I talked about earlier, and I was a really, really bad youth player. And so there was a significant concern that maybe I would put my dad in a tough situation when it came to high school time. I was just kind of little and weak, and I had little league seasons where I was hitless, but I cared so much and I tried so hard. And then, fortunately for me, with hard work and just kind of luck in terms of how you grow and mature, suddenly at like 13, 14, like I started catching up to my peers and then passing some of them and becoming better. And I think that's one of the most important things in my journey is how bad it started. And so I've never, ever, as a coach, lost the appreciation for how hard the game is
Yeah.
and how tough it is to not be successful. And so that was kind of the foundation in which my baseball journey was built, is that I had this great love for it and it didn't love me back. I didn't receive the results. And so through high school, I improved as a player and was fortunate enough to, play with some really good guys. When you hit in front of Colton Wong, you're going to get a lot of fastballs and they're not going to walk you. When you hit behind, I hit behind a professional baseball player and in front of a professional baseball player. So I know how to hit and run. I know how to get the bunt down. I know how to hit a ground ball when they're on third base. And so it put me in a really good position to have a higher high school WAR. And I got to be an all-conference player as a result of that, but much more as a result of the work and the cerebral and not the ability. And then I had the opportunity to go play at the University of Puget Sound, which is a Division III school. My family and I chose that, and I similar experiences, I think, to you and your son, where you're finding that balance of you have that reality that playing at a higher level is achievable and it's still incredibly cool, and you're still in a very small percentage, but also you're going to go pro in something other than life and playing. So what's the balance? What's the best? And so the University of Puget Sound is a really, really well-respected liberal arts institution where I also could play. And so I went there, and the interesting thing is I thought, okay, I'm a all-state player from the state of Hawaii. This is Division III baseball. I'm going to go there. These guys probably suck. I'm going to go there and play right away. And they were so much more physically superior. They were men. They were 21, 22, 20-year-old men, and I couldn't hang physically. Just at the 6 a.m. conditioning, let alone in gameplay. Suddenly, all my little bags of tricks and in-game knowledge wasn't enough to close the gap. And so I had to do another step to catch up. But I'd done this before in my life. I needed to become more physical. And, I had to improve bat speed and arm strength just to get on the field. And so that was a fun journey as well. And it really continued that humility in the manner in which I thought about myself as a player, even though I just reached recent success. And I found my way into the field towards the end of my career and started becoming a regular and very similar to high school, where it kind of concluded on a really high note. And then it was like, okay, what the heck am I going to do? So I thought, okay, maybe I'm going to be a history professor who coaches high school baseball in whatever college. Or maybe I'm going to be a college administrator. Maybe I'll be in student affairs or a dean, and I'll be assistant at like a local liberal arts. I wanted it as like baseball is the second thing. And I had this passion for politics and history and student affairs and education. And so I wasn't sure. And I kind of needed that stall year to help me figure it out. And my coach, Brian Billings at the University of Puget Sound, he offered me the opportunity to come on as a $3,000 a year assistant. And I jumped to it. I said, hey, I've coached summer ball for the last 2 summers. I've coached 16-year-old kids, 15-year-old kids. I love that. Why not? Why not give it a shot? What's 1 year?
Yeah.
And so I jumped in, and again, another thing where tough situations become good fortunes. I didn't realize how much my relationships were going to change. These guys were my teammates. I'm having a beer with them 2 months ago. Now I'm getting mad at them when we screw up our cut and relay. Right. So these made for really, really tough conversations. And I knew how it felt to be in the dorm room, complaining about something the staff did. And now I was no longer in the dorm room. I was in my apartment, not part of that conversation. I was probably the topic of that conversation. So when you want to talk about that emotional intelligence piece, now you're acutely aware of what's going on, and you're exceptionally thoughtful about how your decisions and the things you say affect the ball club as a whole and the individuals. And so that was with great fortune that that was my first job, and it was exceptionally tough. And I'll have no tougher job, even in the major leagues, than coaching my friends. That was will always be the toughest coaching job I ever had. And so I went through there, and we did that for 3 seasons, and we improved as a defense. And I found passion for that style of play as hitting and pitching became more and more scientific and more research based. Defensive play stayed pure. It was about playing catch. It was about attention to detail. It was about knowing your role, your responsibility, understanding the priorities, and executing. And I love that because I could still do a ton of modern research and integrate analytics, but the principles my grandfather taught me when I was a 5-year-old boy still played.
Yeah.
And so that kind of became my niche. And I started to do independent research, and I started speaking about at camps and clinics about it. And after 3 years, it was kind of like, okay, what's next? Now I know this is what I want to do. I want to coach baseball for the rest of their life. I'm in. How do I make it work financially that I don't have to do anything else? That becomes the goal.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, okay, well, the next step is Division I, right? And that's easy to write down on a spreadsheet and easy to say, but how do you get there, right? So you're doing research. And so I start quickly, going through my resources and trying to figure out what Division I coaches have I interacted with along the way. And I spoke at an event in Pepperdine in 2013. And I remember there was this guy named Carl Iwasaki in attendance, and he gave me his business card at the end of it. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to call this guy, and sees what he's going on. And fortunately for me, Coach Iwasaki had an opening. He had a volunteer opening, and it was a slam dunk. So I headed out there. And again, now here's the thing about good fortune that comes from bad fortune. I had no idea. They had no money.
Yeah.
They had no money.
Mhm.
And the staff was working their absolute butts off just to make it work in the current circumstances. And they had garnered a decent amount of respect just using what they had. And I had no idea. I was in the assumption that all things were created equal. And so part of my job as his volunteer was to create revenue in addition to make players better, in addition to help, and in addition to help bring in better players as well. And so the only thing I could think of in terms of creating revenue was running camps. I'd done camps my whole life. I'd done camps at Puget Sound. So why not do camps? And so I started hosting camps up at Northern Colorado to feature the quality of coaches we had and to create opportunities for Colorado kids and have interactions with high school coaches. And as we did that and it grew, I thought, okay, I need more regional and national advertising for these camps. They're going well. So I started shooting 30-second video spots that were advertisements for those camps. And those became the original Friday Fielders videos. And so once the camp season was done, it was time to go to work. It was time to coach our club. People started tweeting at me saying, hey, where are those videos? Thinking that we were doing them for instruction and exposure as opposed to advertising. So I said, shoot, well, I guess maybe this is a good thing for our program. Maybe once a week, I'll put up a video of our guys playing catch or our guys doing some kind of drill, and it can keep the train rolling. It can maintain recruit interest. It can also serve as advertising for future camps. So I started doing those once a week videos. And I think at the beginning, 12, 15 people would watch them and I'd get excited. I thought it was cool, and that magnified as time went on. And we improved our on-field results. We improved the quality of recruits we were signing, and we improved the size of our camps. And those videos kind of standalone were a big part of it. And little did I know that other really important people were watching those videos. I thought, okay, it's great. High school coaches are watching them, kids are watching them, but I found out that professional organizations had been watching them. And so I got a call from the Cleveland Indians, winter of 2017, and they wanted me to come out to Cleveland and interview to be one of their minor league infield coaches. And I had no idea. I thought it was a prank. That was in the spirit. My exposure for myself was in the spirit of those things. It was, creating the most successful program possible, doing my part as a member of the staff. And so I went out there and we talked through it. And I was fortunate enough to to get the job with Cleveland and head out and become their Arizona infield coordinator, which meant I was coaching the youngest and newest members of the organization. I was basically part of the onboarding team.
Mhm.
And then again, good fortune comes my way. Johnny Goro, Robbie Thompson, Travis Fryman, Anthony Madrano, John McDonald, all these really, really long time successful infield instructors who had produced Gio Urshela and Joey Wendell and Francisco Lindor and Eric Gonzalez and years of major league infielders. They all were still there working. And I got to be in the room, and this is where listening comes in. And I got to absorb the years of them riding the bus and having tough conversations and making position changes. And I was fortunate to be surrounded with those guys and learn and collaborate beside them. And then I was promoted to the overall defensive coordinator for the organization, and which allowed me to spend some time with our major league staff and get really quality time with Brad Mills and Sandy Alomar Jr. and Mike Sarball and most importantly Tito Francona, and see how they worked and see how things were different at that level and things were the same at that level, and kind of recognize some gaps I needed to close if I was going to coach there one day. Well, along the way, Gabe Kapler had been watching, and I didn't know from the days at Northern Colorado. He had been kind of consuming the work and tracking the on-field progress, and he gave me an opportunity to interview when I was only 29 to be on his bench in Philadelphia. And the role went to an older coach, Bobby Dickerson, who's somebody I really look up to in the organization. I mean, in professional baseball.
I played with Bobby.
Really?
Yeah, he probably doesn't remember me, but we played together in the Jayhawk League out in Hutchinson, Kansas one summer when I was in college.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So the role went to Bobby, but it was a great experience. And more than anything else, it showed me two things. Hey, I got a shot to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And B, gosh, I still got some stuff I need to learn. Right. I got a gap. The gap between myself and Bobby is significant. There's so much more that he's done, and he's learned. Guys like Perry Hill and Brian Butterfield and Ron Washington, the experiences they've had, I need to play catch up in that regard. And so went back, worked in the Indians system for another year in that defensive coordinator role. And then Cap came calling again when he got the opportunity in San Francisco and hired me to be his bench coach. And that's what I do in present day. In my bench coach role, it's a lot of fun. It's a dream job, obviously. As the bench coach, you get to run spring training. So if you facilitate the schedule, the camps, kind of all the day-to-day stuff. And then I get to do, obviously, a lot of infield instruction. That's the primary thing under my umbrella, some team defensive instruction. And then assist in game management, be part of that larger group that suggests ideas and asks questions and finds the best matchups. But the biggest component of my job more than anything else is finding the balance with all the information that's out there and the analytics that's out there and the actual game being played on the field. And so long story short, that's the journey from player to coach. I tried to condense it as much as possible, but also, recognize the small moments, that created growth along the way.
And I think the thing I take out of your journey is how you always in everything you did, growing and growing and growing and growing, was you were always listening and learning, and you were always willing to observe and just watch, listen, and learn. And now you'll be able, and along the way, you're able to, coach what you believe in and coach what you know, which is unbelievable, the amount of knowledge that you have. But that's all because you put your ego aside and said, hey, I don't know it all. And I am so excited to keep learning and growing.
Yeah, no, 100%. And not just like anybody else, that my ego gets in the way as well, right? Because you can be prideful of the amount of work you put in.
Yeah.
You can be prideful of your preparation. You can be prideful of the amount of listening you've done.
Yeah.
And I think it's the acknowledgement that it's never over, that it's a dirt path. That's the most important thing. And every once in a while, those moments that I brought up, they weren't moments that I walked into and I was going to listen right away. They were moments that I was fortunate enough to fail in that reminded me I got to keep listening, and that's an important piece.
And I have a saying that life's not an obligation, it's an opportunity. And the sports that you and I coach, baseball, is there's an old saying that it's a game of failure, because a guy in the major leagues can fail 7 out of 10 times and make millions and millions of
Yeah.
dollars. And I've kind of turned that around and said, I don't think it's a game of failure. I think it's a game of complete opportunity, because when you fail 7 out of 10 times, that's 7 times that you have an opportunity to learn from your failure. It's not failing 7 times, because at least you went out there and you gave it everything you had. It just didn't work out at that point. And you can learn from that experience and what you could do the next time. And I think that's what you've done your whole career, is you're always looking at opportunities to grow. You're always looking at that opportunity to help others grow. And I think that's what sets you apart.
I appreciate you saying that. And that's definitely the case with the major leaguers that I'm fortunate enough to work with, is they're some of the greatest adapters and adjusters in regard to athletes that I've ever been around.
And let's get into that. What's the difference between, because I say this all the time. I had Walt Weiss on last week, who's the bench coach for the Braves, and I kind of asked him this question too. What separates a guy, because you've coached now from almost every level all the way up. What separates a guy? Because there's so many guys out there that are so talented and have so much ability and skill level. What's the difference between a guy who makes it to the major leagues and a guy who maybe doesn't?
Yeah. Well, it's cool. First off, that you had Walt last week. I think we might be the only bench coaches that have coached high school baseball in the last decade.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
that's a fun comparison. I'm interested to hear what he said after I give my answer first. I think it's the old floor and ceiling thing, right? So I think all the major leaguers have exceptionally high ceiling because they have some superpower, right? Whether it's vision, perception, speed, arm strength, rotational power, the coordination to apply bat to ball, they have some God-given gift that makes them superior to 99% of the population. But the minor leagues and college are chock full of those guys as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the ceiling component. So they aren't without that. But I think what the major leaguers have is they have a ridiculous floor. Like their worst is such a high clip. Right? You watch a major league infield in spring training, right? I can catch at first base in spring training, thinking back to Jose Ramirez, and I could have been seated on a 6-foot ladder on the most like precarious little ladder possible, and I would never have fallen off that ladder. He hit me in my chest over and over and over. He'd spin and throw. He'd throw it in the low slot and throw. And I think that's what they are. Is their consistency is absurd. Their worst day is still better than most people's best day. And I think one thing's a product of talent, right? Their ceiling's a product of talent, but I think their floor is a product of their work and their routines. And I think major leaguers are exceptional at knowing what they need to prepare. They go through the same routine in the training room, in the weight room, onto the practice fields, in the cages, to repeat, to create the solutions to the problems they're going to face in the game. So therefore, when they get in weird spots, or they get a tough pitch, or they get a tough hop, they can make the adjustment. They have the movement in their bag of tricks already. They're not improvising, and they can go from there. And so I think that's what separates them. Is when you watch, when you watch minor leaguers in spring training games, you can have a guy played in high A come up and strike Mike Trout out on a chance.
Mm-hmm.
He's flashing his ceiling for you, but he might give up consecutive walks the next 2 batters to 2 guys you never heard of. Yeah. Right? You can have a minor league player come up and play in the 8th inning of a spring training game and homer off a big league closer who never gives off homers. But he could give away 10 at bats the next day. I think the major leaguers, they don't have that letdown. They work at such a high clip, and they rehearse and they practice and they train and they adjust at such a high clip that the floor of their in-game performance is incredibly high. And so that's my observation, is as I've climbed through different levels, people with the high ceiling exist at every level, but the floor gets higher and higher the levels you go.
How much is that as their mindset?
I think mindset's a huge component, because for 2 reasons, right? You have to have that mindset to put in that quality of work, to do that religious of routines with varied results. I think that's one thing. And then the second thing is you have to have the mindset to overcome what you call those opportunities for learning. As they climb through levels and as things get more and more difficult, they have to reevaluate and reshape what success looks like for them. And so I think both of those things are products of the quality of mindset that they
A-
possess.
And let's look at what now let's throw in mental toughness to this mix. What do you think about that with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge component. Now, that's on a spectrum, right?
Hmm.
I'd love to come on as a coach and tell kids that every guy is mentally tough to the same theory. And that's not, you got to have some mix, right? It's like making a stew. All the
Yeah,
things we talked about in the last 5 minutes, you just got to have good parts of each of them.
yeah,
You know, you can be slightly less mentally tough than the next guy, but gosh, you better be a better adjuster,
yeah.
right? Or you better have a high end skill, but you got to have all those components. You can't be without them. The car doesn't run.
And how do you coach that? How do you coach heart or mental toughness into guys? Is that to me, that's one of the hardest things to do, but I also think it's one of the most fun things to do or the most challenging things to do. And I love that challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a really tough thing, right? And I think one of the first things for that is awareness. Is
Hmm.
the player has to recognize that there's an opportunity for growth because it's deeply personal. It's not a swing change, right? A mentality change or a mentality evolution is very tough.
Yeah.
And so I think creating awareness, showing them either video or or testimonial that allow and asking the right questions and allow them to realize like, oh gosh, maybe I got to reevaluate what I think about from pitch to pitch or from practice to practice or game to game. So I think that's the first step, is creating that awareness. I think too often as coaches, we go in with the solution before the player even knows there's the problem. Right. And so I think creating that awareness is the first thing, because it's going to be about have a series of tough conversations. And then
So,
the second,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. And then the second thing is creating an opportunity for ownership. When you're talking about
Yes.
mental toughness, right? You're talking about partnering with the player. It can't be a coach driven thing, right? The coach is the co-pilot, right? And the player is the one driving the car. You could say, hey, you might slow down a little here. Hey, we should take this turn, but you can't grab the wheel. And I think once you create awareness, then there's that opportunity for ownership. They need to be the captain of those things, and you need to be the bumpers in the bowling alley that keep kind of guiding it down the road. And then the third thing is you got to know that it's not going to be linear. These are habits that have been established by mom and dad and by the third grade teacher and everybody in between. And it's going to go 5 steps backwards, forward, 3 steps backwards, 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. And you're going to be going up and down that staircase, and you can't lose patience. One of the toughest things as a coach is losing patience for those really tough problems to solve, like the guy who throws his helmet, or the guy who always says something to say to the umpire. These are habits that are harder to break than arm patterns.
Hmm.
And I think you have to recognize that it's not going to be foolproof, that you're going to go back and forth. And so those are the 3 most important things to me: creating awareness of the problem, partnering with the player so they're the owner, they're the driver of that change, and then acknowledging that it's not going to be a clean path to success.
So again, creating awareness is that emotional intelligence piece, right? Awareness is part of emotional intelligence. So helping your player have some emotional intelligence as well. And then the second piece is when you're working with your player, so your player doesn't feel like he's working for you, he's working
Yep.
with you. And I think that's a huge component of the second and third piece that you just said. So in that vein, when I watch you work with your major league guys on the videos that you've posted and stuff, and you're working with these guys, the one thing I noticed was this: how important is it to get to know your player or to get to know the person that you're leading in terms of coaching them on the field or in the workplace or whatever? How important is it to get to know what strengths and stuff have and what motivates them and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. And I said the word earlier, but it's context, right? Like context before coaching, right? You have to. And that's the one thing I learned from college baseball is you're so lucky when you're the recruiting coordinator. You sit in the home, you hear dad talk about the kid, you hear mom talk about the kid, you hear them talk about themselves. You talk to the high school coach and you hear what he's got to say. You talk to the club coach, you hear what he's got to say. You get so much context. By the time they arrive on campus, you don't realize that entire process has made you better off. And when I went to professional baseball and I started instructing these guys, I'm not the scout who drafted them. I'm not the general manager or the scouting director who made the decision, right? I'm not even the farm director who's deciding what level. I'm just their infield coach. I have no context. And that was another reminder. Oh, shoot, I got to sit back and watch and listen a little bit. I got to see what makes them tick. I got to ask questions. I got to talk about their personal life. Do you have a wife? Do you have kids? Where do you live in the off season? And all these things go into the pot that influence how we go on a given day, how we learn on a given day, how we deal with success, how we deal with failure. And so I think that's one thing that I've always taken is I always start a relationship with a player like a recruiting coordinator before I'm the coach, because that's what college taught me is you need to gain that information. You need to have the background. That guy might have just changed his fielding to this style, and now you're going to propose a new change. Or the other thing we forget, this guy might be going through a difficult time in another category.
Mm-hmm.
It could be at home, or it could be much closer. He could be making a swing change right now. How appropriate is for me to change the way he fields the same week that they're changing the way he swings,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's got no bandwidth for that. And so I think you're 1,000% right. Those relationships and that context, it has to precede instruction.
And I always go back to, I always remember telling all my young coaches who would get frustrated with a player, that I always tell them, you don't know what's going on in that player's home life.
Yeah.
Or maybe something they failed a test at school that day or something, like get to know them at a different level. Now you can really coach them at a different level.
Yep.
And as I watch you coach guys too, you really coach, and I want you to talk about the importance of coaching to the strength of the player.
Yeah. I think that's like the physical context. We
Yes.
just talked about like the relationship and emotional context. The physical context is an important one. And I think that's where film's an important piece. Is I think coaches really do themselves a disservice when they just trust their eyes. I think the more you can watch your player move on your own time when he's not around, film a practice session and watch all the ground balls, film off BP session and watch all that tape, go back and look at old game tape and really get a sense of, oh gosh, he's better at that than I thought he was. Oh, he's worse at that than I thought I was. Okay, well, the reason why coaching to those strengths is such a big thing is that's the thing that someone's prideful of, right? And you can not only use that to help them be more successful in the game, but you can use that as a leaping off point to then access the weakness. And I think we always want to say, all right, you're bad at this. We're going to talk about this. We're going to practice this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, there's a reason that he arrived with that inability, that physical weakness. And so it's like, how did he arrive? There's also a reason why he arrived at that strength, right? It's like, hey, why is your squat so strong, but your bench press so weak? Oh, well, my uncle taught me to squat when I was 14, and this is what I think about when I do that, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, now I can take that strength and reimagine that and speak in that language and find a new story and a new chapter to write about the bench press in the context of the squat. Mm-hmm. So now we're acknowledging what you do well, we're focusing on what you do well, and we're using that to replicate the process and improve what you do poorly. And I think that's an important thing in baseball. Things can be broken down to a million pieces, and it's so easy to dissect somebody and cause paralysis by overanalysis, and they forget what even makes them tick. And I think focusing on the strength and you pivoting from there is a really important piece of the puzzle, psychologically and physically.
Well, and I watch you. I was watching you do work with your first baseman. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'd like to kind of analogize sports into the real world, into business too, because I think everything we're talking about can help every leader out there, business, coaching, whatever it might be, teaching. What we're talking about is the way I think people should handle people all the time, to be honest with you, as a leader. But I watched you work with first baseman, and the thing that really struck me was this: you asked the player, what do you do better, the backhand or the forehand? And then when the player answered that question, you said, okay, let's work on that. So you asked them what they felt was their strength, what they felt more comfortable with. And then you took that and ran with it, and you coached that strength to them. Thought that was awesome to watch.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think it's an educational practice, right? Yeah. Question mm-hmm. is an educator or a leader's greatest weapon, right? Because you get everything out of it. You mm-hmm. get all the things we just talked about. It plays to the emotional intelligence. It gives you more data in that part. It plays to the context. You get more understanding. It plays to the physical context. And then it also plays to the awareness. people will surprise you all the time with the way they answer questions in the field. A guy will tell you that he's bad at something that he's good at because he's just trying to say what you think, or he's such a harsh critic on himself, or his old man's tough on him. People will say things in the opposite. They'll tell you they're good at stuff that they're awful at. And getting that context and understanding, okay, you know, what's going on here is an important piece. And then the second reason why I ask questions like that is I'm a firm believer in a la carte practice plans. I got an idea of the destination where I want to go with the session, but the buy-in is so much better when I give you the menu and allow you to pick along the way. And sometimes I'll make a suggestion, but gosh, what kind of success are you going to get at any level when you ask a guy, hey, what drill do you want to do out of these two? And they pick the other one. You're not going to get the pushback, the eye roll. They're not going to be looking at their clock to see when it's on. They selected that, right? And they appreciate that they've even given the choice. And so I think those are the two ways that asking questions in a session help, is they provide context and you get a sense of awareness, but more importantly, they also make the player feel like they're guiding that session as well.
And I think the huge part in the huge piece of that, because I used to ask that too with my players. Sometimes I'd ask my player, what do you think the lineup should be? Or I'd ask my players when I was making the practice plan, what do you guys think we need to work on today? And the reason I was doing that, and it's the same thing you were just talking about, I wanted to create ownership with my players. I wanted to empower them, to give them confidence to think, okay, this is why I think we need to work on. And then once they're doing it, now that they have ownership in it, how much harder and more focused are they going to work on that skill that we're trying to accomplish there? So that that empowerment and that ownership thing is huge. You had mentioned that way earlier in our talk about the ownership piece, and that's one way to do it.
Yeah, and then the other thing is it's a great learning technique as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what they say, that the person doing the speaking carries the cognitive load, right? And so when a kid picks, you ask it, hey, what bunt play would you run here?
Mm-hmm.
To make that decision and think through that and give you an answer is a greater learning opportunity than you saying, when the game's close, we're going to run the wheel. And when the game's not close, we're going to run the regular play. And sometimes in between, we're going to run a crash play. All right. So they learned what you said. They can repeat your phrase, but they don't necessarily know what that means. When you say, hey, guys, first and second, we're up by 1, top of 6th. What would you guys want to run here? When they sit through and unpack that on their own, they have a true understanding of why the play is being called and what's the goal of the play. Right. And that's for anything in life. Is when you're forced to make that decision, you're going to have a much better understanding. And that circles all the way back to you and I being sons of coaches.
Yeah.
We heard those conversations happening over and over, and we understand the value of players being exposed to those types of dialogues.
Yeah, the ownership piece is huge. And I think where a lot of leaders fail in that is they're afraid that they're going to lose control. And I think it's okay as a leader to give your people ownership and encouragement and empowerment. And, I've gone out to the mound before in a situation where, like you're talking about, a bunt situation. I'm like, okay, I want to get my guys ready. And I asked them, which one do you guys want to run? One, because I wanted them to have the ownership to feel comfortable in it. If I just dictate that all the time, it doesn't mean that they're going to be comfortable in that all the time. But if they have ownership in it and they feel comfortable and tell me, I think we should run this, let's go. Let's roll with it then. And I have to be okay with it if it doesn't work, right? I still have to celebrate their decision there because I want them to have that ownership. Because my purpose in coaching was, I want you to have that ownership when you're the leader someday at your job. I want you to feel comfortable with that. So going into the last part here, I know you got to get going. I could go for days with you on this kind of stuff. This has been so awesome for me. Thank you. What's your purpose in life, Kai?
Ooh, gosh, that's a really tough question.
I'll start it this way then. What's your purpose for coaching?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say my purpose for coaching is there's so many factors, right? So one thing is, putting people in the best positions to be successful, right? So allowing people to reach their potential by creating environments that they can thrive, right? That's a major component.
And you're great at it, by the way.
I appreciate you saying that. And then I think another component is, bringing that like interpersonal joy that comes from team environments, I think if anything, being quarantined for a year shown all of us is that a lot of us are fueled by that human interaction more than we realized. Right. And
Yeah.
so I think being a coach is creating creating that opportunity for humans to interact and be together and grow together, And then um the last part is being a competitor, you know, attempting to win.
Yeah.
Not everything has to be a Hallmark card answer. We all want to be successful in life. We want to get together with another group of people with a like-minded goal and go out there and set out to win. And I think those are kind of the three-pronged things. I think I like using coaching to make people happy. I like using coaching to help people reach their potential, and I like using coaching to try to win, to get my guys against somebody else's guys, and let's go, let's compete.
And I think all three of your purposes there. And I have a saying that says, when your purpose is greater than yourself, then you're pretty satisfied with life.
Mm-hmm.
And all three of those purposes were dealing with helping others, which I think is pretty cool. What about in life? I know you have a wife and a daughter and so forth. Is this purpose kind of the same thing?
Yeah, I think it's very similar, right? Like, I think your partnership, and this much better than I, in terms of being married longer and being a father longer. I'm a little leaguer in both of those. But I will tell you that's the most challenging co-coach you'll ever have.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the most challenging player you'll ever have, because you don't have a break from them. They're sitting there right there at the table eating with you. And so I think it's very, very similar. It's about creating opportunities for all of us together to grow, for all of us together to succeed, and for all of us together to have enjoyment, enjoy life. And then a little bit of win, to create opportunities that we can, live in nice places and go on nice vacations and enjoy life in that regard. And so I think it's very, very similar. I think about family, and I think about your team in the same way. Is that, when things are successful, people are rooting for the greater good. And when you're rooting for the greater good, then you have individual success, along the way. And you could take that a step further. You could say, I think about that the same for country as well.
Oh, yeah. So now let's go to passion. What's your passion in life?
I'm incredibly passionate about teaching. No matter what version, alternate universe, I would find myself, I think I always find myself teaching. I think that's like my favorite thing. It's not for financial gain. It's not for attention. And it's hard to say when you're a Major League Baseball coach. People are like, yeah. My wife will get mad at me, but I'll go on a run and there'll be two kids playing catch at the park. And next thing you know, I got the two kids throwing into the net, and I got their dad filming. And because it's just, that's enjoyable to me. The idea to share and discuss, and, no matter what, I think about all the time, what I'm going to do when I'm done coaching. Right. And that's a long way away. I'm only 32 years old, but, I always tell my wife, maybe I should get another degree. Maybe I should get a master's or doctorate while I'm coaching. So that way, when I'm done, I can go be a junior college professor, and I could teach Native American history or what, that's my, doesn't even matter the topic. I love the interaction that comes with the sharing and teaching and discussing. And so that's definitely my passion.
And I think, I have a saying that says purpose equals passion and passion equals purpose. I don't think you can have one with the other. And your two purpose and passion just totally mesh. And it's all about serving others. And you mentioned COVID real quick, and this will be the last one. The COVID has kind of helped us kind of generate a new perspective. What's your perspective on coaching and perspective on life now?
Yeah. I think it's the same as everyone else. Mine is not unique, right? It's that you realize that the bad days when people weren't dying, when you weren't limited, when businesses weren't struggling, weren't that bad.
Yeah.
Right. COVID has provided all of us with that context that we said you need as a coach.
Yeah.
It's provided us that, hey, gosh, it could be worse. Someone's always got it worse than you, and so I think COVID has continued to give me like a big picture gratitude. I'm fortunate that my industry isn't hugely affected. I'm fortunate that I can keep my family safe and that they don't have to go work frontline jobs where they're, subjected to more human interaction. I'm fortunate that I haven't had a direct serious loss within my nuclear family or my parents or cousins and aunts and uncles. And so I think that's really all that COVID has reminded me. It's reminded me that you can go and make a big error in the ninth inning and lose a game, and it's really not that bad. It's not the end of the world compared to other things, and I think that we've all experienced that to a certain extent.
Kai, I want to thank you. This has been so awesome. I get so excited to talk to elite people, and you're an elite person. You're not just an elite coach. You're just an elite person all the way around. And being able to share your story and share your thoughts to help other people. Again, you're always out there teaching and helping people learn and get to be beyond what they thought they could be. And you did that again today, and I appreciate you coming on. I'm just starting this out and on my journey to try to help people do the same thing, and getting people like you on here is so fun for me. So I want to thank you for coming on today.
No, it's my pleasure. And as I started the show, I wanted to thank you. The feeling is mutual, and I've always been grateful for the mentorship of the high school coaches that have filled similar roles to my father for me as I've lived in different states and been different places along my journey. And so I'll always remember how kind you and so many others, Scott Bullocks and everybody else in between, were when I became a Coloradan, and that's why I was excited to be back. And so I'm look forward to more conversations like this.
Well, we're excited to have you back in Colorado. I was so excited when you said you bought a house here and you're living up in Fort Collins, and you're one of the only college coaches that would ever come to our games. I just want you to know you were a grinder, and I appreciated that. I really appreciated that.
I still remember Dean Adams' signals. So
yeah. Awesome guy.